Morning, everybody. It's Bob Plaschke here. I am the CEO of Sonim Technologies, this is now starting to become a kind of regular habit. Every Monday at 11 o'clock, I kind of log in, pick a friend in the public safety community, and sit and chat and talk about all things FirstNet, which, by the way, I'll come back. It's kind of a pun, but I'll come back to that in a couple of seconds. And just talk about issues that are facing folks in public safety today as they convert from old kind of proprietary narrowband kind of walkie-talkie technologies, and they convert to using smartphones, hopefully some of ours, smartphones on a new FirstNet network that is being run and operated by AT&T. Last week, if you remember, we had Donnie Jackson from the Urgent Communications talking about the IWCE show, where there was a lot of good FirstNet announcements. Next week, we have TJ Kennedy, who is just left his post as the president of FirstNet, and so TJ will be a great great person to chat with about kind of his perspectives about FirstNet and kind of how that he thinks it's going to kind of roll out, so to speak, over the next couple of years. But today we have a really special guest, and this is an old friend of mine. I should say someone who's been a friend of mine for many years, not an old friend of mine, but a friend of mine for many years, who has been with me and has supported us and has supported a number of folks who have tried to get this FirstNet network up and running. And I'd like to introduce you all to Dick Mirgon. Dick, good morning.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate you having me here. And I'll take the old as a positive, because it just means that I've earned it and kind of been there, done that.
Well, you definitely have been there and done that. For the folks that are listening or watching, and by the way, feel free to ask questions if you want to ask Dick or myself questions. There's a chat capability there somewhere. For the folks that don't know who Dick is what he's called one of the Four Horsemen. And these were the four lead lobbyists from public safety who negotiated starting almost 10 years ago and spent many, many years on Capitol Hill and then in the community creating support for the bill that was passed in 2013, the Middle American Act, which then created the funding and created the concept of FirstNet. Dick was at the time the president of APCO, which is one of the major public safety associations or entities in terms of driving policy and driving education inside public safety, but has been in kind of law enforcement for many, many years. Dick, why don't you, for those who haven't had a chance to meet you, why don't you give a little bit of your background, kind of what you did, how you got what you did at APCO, and kind of what you're doing now.
Sure. I'm one of those people who've done a little bit of everything in public safety. Started out as a deputy sheriff in West Metro Denver in the 70s. Went from there to a county department head. Moved to Nevada, where I ran an IT department, public safety dispatch center, covering actually parts of California and Nevada, 2 counties there. I then transitioned into not transitioned, but became a part of APCO, ran for their board of directors, and during my term on the APCO board, we had this opportunity to try and affect public safety long-term. Interoperability had been an issue for years, so myself, Jeff Johnson, Chris Moore, Chuck Dowd, banded together one afternoon, so to speak, and came up with this idea of going after additional spectrum, getting some funding from Congress, and creating this public-private partnership that's now known as FirstNet. Since that time, when I retired in about 2012, about the time of the legislation passed, I've been doing consulting. I run an independent consulting company, which I own. I also run this blog called All Things FirstNet, where we support the whole FirstNet endeavor and the adoption and use of FirstNet. So now I consult and try to be an advocate at large for the cause of not only FirstNet, but companies like Sonim, which have focused on and supported public safety for a long time. And Bob and Sonim has been one of those companies that was there kind of before the beginning, before the law passed, came out and supported us, built a device for Band 14 and public safety, which nobody else was doing. So Sonim was, I like to call it the iPhone of public safety. They were the guys that came up with the first device, hardened, public safety grade. They've just launched the XP8, which is an absolutely outstanding device. Long-term battery life meets all the things we've asked for. So this has just been a wonderful journey and still trying to support the cause.
Oh, thank you, Dick. Those very kind words. Dick was this group that came to visit us and basically said, look, we're going to do what no one thought we could do. We're going to get the most valuable spectrum in the United States. We're going to get 20 megahertz, which is a big chunk. It's roughly a quarter of AT&T's holdings, or the equivalent to a quarter of AT&T's holdings. And we're going to get billions of dollars to put this thing together. And we have, in effect, gotten to a place that no one ever expected us to get to. And they came and said, our challenge now is that the market is kind of small, or at least is perceived to be small, just the 3 million emergency responders. And so we can't get the normal OEMs, the normal handset manufacturers to make phones for us. And so Dick and Chuck and Chris and Jeff said, if you'll support us, and by building out early prototypes of band class 14 devices, will be helpful to you in terms of at least helping you understand how to build products for public safety. And Dick, you and the other horsemen have done everything as you said you would. And you must now look at starting 10 years ago, when indeed you started down this path. You must look with some degree of pride. You now have 56 states and territories that have opted in. You have AT&T spending billions and billions of dollars building this network, and you have public safety agencies across the country now actively engaged in learning about what the kind of the new world looks like. You must be very proud.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has been a journey of firsts and doing the impossible, doing things that people on Capitol Hill said we could never do. We did things that a lot of people would have never even tried to do. And part of what I contribute our success to is a combination of if we had known all the problems, we might not have done it. So we didn't know what we were challenging or what the challenges were. And the other was a whole lot of people. You see people talking about, well, they were there in the beginning, they were the first, and people go, well, who were they? But the reality is there's a lot of theys. There's a lot of people that if they hadn't done their little part, whether it was Sonim building the first device, Donnie Jackson writing about it, just a multitude of people, if they hadn't done their little part, it might not have succeeded. But we were able to get through Congress, get a bill, get $7 billion. The spectrum was worth $20 billion that we now, public safety through FirstNet, hold the license to. We got all states to opt in, which again, nobody thought would happen. And I think a lot of that has to do with public safety sees the value of having a single public safety nationwide network. We have for so many years, quote, had our own networks saying, well, we can make them interoperable, we can interconnect them. Fact is, we can't. We've all been on different carriers for over the years and we don't interconnect them. And there's always problem. Heck, we even have the same P25 networks sitting next to each other in jurisdictions that can't talk to each other. So we needed a single carrier. And, there were only 3 people that bid for the project. AT&T had the ability to, and not only the ability, but the mindset to reshape what they do as a corporation to support FirstNet. And they did things a corporation wouldn't necessarily do. They were smart enough to figure out, how do you get us everything we need and still make it profitable for them as a corporation? We knew that was always an issue, that some corporation had to figure out how to make it profitable. We had tried on another auction to do that, and it failed because the carriers have said, look, it's not profitable, it's not to our advantage. Well, AT&T stepped up, they made it happen. They were smart enough to figure it out. So, my hat's off to them, and a lot of thanks to them for supporting public safety, just like Sonim supported public safety.
Yeah, I view you as the other folks that we've talked about. I view you guys as kind of like you're the framers of the Constitution of the United States in that context. And so, you put the structure together and you kind of hope it works out. List like kind of give me one or two what I would call unexpected, huge benefits that you've seen that you didn't envision from the legislation and from the FirstNet structure and from the auction, and list out one or two unexpected kind of things that, boy, if you thought about it, you probably would have maybe framed the document, the Constitution, so to speak, differently.
Okay, let me do that in reverse order. One of the things I would have done differently is FirstNet is an independent authority. I would have changed that language to make it stronger as an independent authority. They fall under the Department of Commerce. There's some regulatory and policy issues that go along with them being attached that I don't necessarily think that it's been easy for the FirstNet board to navigate through some of the federal processes. So that's one of the things that we should have done differently. This independent authority should have been much clearer and much cleaner. One of the benefits we've gotten out of all this was the support we had out of different federal agencies in the issuing the RFP. I mean, this was a very comprehensive RFP that took, comments for about a year from public safety on how to build the requirements for the network provider. And they did an outstanding job of listening to public safety, understanding, what it is we needed. I don't think I never envisioned that kind of horsepower to come in. And Department of Interior gets a lot of credit for supporting FirstNet on that whole RFP process. So as much as people thought it was cumbersome, it was to public safety's advantage. One of the things that did play out well is that, and did stay as part of our intent, that is the FirstNet Authority owns the spectrum. I mean, they represent public safety. This is a public safety network controlled by public safety members on the board, and we've been able to maintain that continuity. Yes, we've got some private sector people, but those private sector people there are to help public safety. So when folks talk about, this being just another network, it absolutely is not. We own the spectrum as public safety through the FirstNet Authority. We have the authority to oversee how it's built. They hold the license, they hold the contract, they hold the vendor accountable for it. They have set up independent cores. Then the process of how the traffic flows in the network keeps it isolated. So this is in fact a truly independent public safety secure network being built by AT&T, but managed, owned by public safety through the FirstNet Authority. And so that was one of the big advantages that I didn't completely understand, that strength and horsepower behind that piece.
And I'm not trying to feed you an answer, but in my mind, one of the, at least for me, one of the massively unanticipated benefits of this process is when AT&T put all of its spectrum at play. I mean, when we were talking before the RFP process, or at least I assumed this would be, it would be a very kind of a long, arduous build out of band class 14 towers. It would take years to wire up states and local municipalities, and that it would be kind of a 5-year kind of slow march to eventually put on 3 million folks. By the fact that AT&T has put all its spectrum to use and given preemption using all its spectrum that's there today, it has massively accelerated so that every agency, most agencies feel like they can play today, that they can actually get real benefit today, and they can actually bring in a number of entities like schools and hospitals and other critical infrastructure into this mix, all immediately, not having to wait for a build out.
Yeah, absolutely. What a lot of people don't realize is, as much as we own a lot of broadband spectrum in 700 doesn't always propagate the best based on the environment. You're in an urban canyon, like New York City, you need a higher spectrum. 900, 1.2 gigs, 2 gigs propagate better. So for them to be able to take that, provide access for public safety to all their spectrum, literally gives us the best throughput, the best coverage we could possibly get from a carrier. Nobody anticipated that somebody would do that. And again, hats off to AT&T. And I don't know if brilliance is a good word, but I'm going to use it. Their brilliance in saying, look, we can do something here, because now that they've got this shared spectrum with public safety and giving us absolute preemption all the time on the network, it provides them the ability to massage that network to our benefit and yet still be able to provide service to their normal customers day to day. So they're the ones who figured out the value to access the whole spectrum to both them and us as public safety. They're the ones who figured out how to do preemption, and I'm going to call it ruthless preemption like Chuck Dowd always did, because it literally moves people off to other spectrum and to other parts of the network when public safety needs it, and the whole priority to make sure that the bandwidth stays there. And other carriers talk about doing that, but they're the only ones who've actually done it and are doing it and have done it in that confined network that we call FirstNet.
Well, let me ask you a couple of tough questions. And for the viewers, to be clear, one of your clients is AT&T, so you work in conjunction with AT&T, so that they know, at least they know where you stand on this. One of the questions is, look, Verizon has stood up, has publicly announced it will offer prioritization preemption. It has publicly offered that it will offer a kind of a same level of security as AT&T. So, what is AT&T doing? Is it that much different?
Yeah, I mean, significant difference in, just for clarity and honesty, everybody knows I do some work for AT&T. My contract is I advise them on public safety issues. I'm not required to advocate for them. And to that extent, anybody who knows me knows that if I thought they were going the wrong way, I'd be the first one to say it. I've got too much invested personally and professionally in seeing the success of FirstNet to do anything other than support public safety. And again, hats off to them, because they're listening to more than just people like me. They're listening to the Public Safety Advisory Committee under FirstNet. They're listening to FirstNet. So there's a lot of people advising them. With that said, other carriers like Verizon, they could have been, they didn't. They talk about supporting public safety, but as I've written in my blogs, there's a lot of 911 networks that they no longer provide. There's a lot of areas in the country they've shut down service. They're looking to maintain their base. They're looking to keep customers. I don't believe for a moment they're looking to support public safety in the same type of secure, dedicated network that FirstNet has done, because if they were, they would have bid. They talked 2 years ago about providing priority, and they didn't. You could go out and buy a VPN, and they were calling it priority, but it wasn't the same thing. So there's a lot of talk, very little action. The action we see with Verizon and other carriers is to protect their customer base, not to support public safety holistically. And I won't drag out into specifics, but if you go back and look at their public comments in the FCC and FirstNet in their responses to the RFIs, it's very clear. They're doing stuff today that they recommended FirstNet shouldn't be doing. And so... yeah, kind of ironic, and I'll be writing about that in the future here. I don't want to give up my little tidbits at this point, but
it's
about protecting customers. I get it. I understand that, but FirstNet wasn't about protecting customer base. FirstNet was about protecting public safety and protecting people. That we've got to be able to communicate on the same network. We can't bring disparate networks together. We've never been able to. Technically, yes, you can. By policy, it doesn't work. And that's why FirstNet. And I would just hope the other vendors would finally just sit there and say, yeah, okay, we can pick up business other places. Let's get public safety onto FirstNet.
No, I agree. By the way, for those watching, I've been in the room multiple times when Dick did share his advice with AT&T, and it was not, it was pointed and direct. And I found this, at least from what it's worth, when anyone that has been, as they say, on the other side of the blue line, which means that they served in public service in some shape or form and in some context in public safety, your heart and your soul is with public safety, it's kind of where you start and where you finish, so to speak. Folks like us, and even AT&T to that degree, we are helpful contributors, but at the end of the day, you guys are you started in public safety, you'll finish in terms of public safety, in terms of where your heart and your biases lay. On that note,
just to add to that real quick, Bob, I think what people don't understand the difference is that I've literally had to watch people die because we couldn't provide service, because we needed a tool we didn't have. I've had friends killed in the line of duty that if we had better tools might not have died. This is truly about saving people's lives, not just first responders, but citizens. So as much as I'm hard on the other carriers, my heart, I truly believe in this issue about protecting people. And I'm sorry other people see it about money, but this is about protecting people.
Well, I mean, that's what I love about this space is that, certainly as a privately held company, we are certainly in this to return value to our shareholders. But I love the notion of being able to work with folks who put their lives on the line every day, work with and support folks who do something that is so selfless. So they've never called themselves a hero, but they are out there they are on the front line. And I've always said this, and it's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege for us to be able to be in this space and to play a small part. Let me go back to the tough questions. Some would say, look, public safety asked for prioritization and preemption for years, asked for it for decades, and AT&T, Verizon, always, and Sprint would say no. That just didn't make sense. Couldn't make it work. Now this spectrum shows up, this money shows up. Now magically, the prioritization and preemption shows up. Will AT&T really keep its focus now that they've gotten this big cache of money and spectrum? Will they really stay focused on public safety, or after 2 or 3 years, their attention will wane?
And this is it's kind of a double-sided sword. Like I said, there's people over at AT&T like Jim Bugel. Jim Bugel was the absolute focal point force within AT&T that was smart enough to figure out the value, how to make it work, how to bring the right people together, like Bob Sloan and Scott Agnew over there, to figure this out. And, always a lot of appreciation to them. They know what this means to public safety. They figured out how to make it work for the corporation. But with that said, those people that are protecting public safety today, that are looking at that business model and understand how to bring both the corporate side and public safety together in a cohesive process, they're not going to always be there. And I'm always concerned about, as corporations change, the CEO has clearly made public safety a priority. He's not going to be there forever. So I ask myself, how do you protect public safety? Well, part of how you protect it is twofold. A lot of the people that have gone to work on the AT&T FirstNet side are there because of the mission. I've met them, I've talked to them. Granted, they're not all that way, but there's a lot of people that, see this as, God and country, the work they're doing in FirstNet, and hats off to them. And I think that's going to help protect that business model. But the other side and the bigger part, there's a 20 or 25-year contract that's going to protect that. Public safety, FirstNet, still owns that spectrum. They have access to it because of the lease agreement. There's payments that AT&T gets when they hit certain benchmarks. So there's contractual work, there's contractual elements that will ensure that they stay compliant with FirstNet and public safety. Goes on for 20 years. There's payments tied to it. If AT&T were to somehow decide that they weren't interested in supporting public safety, that contract will not only help keep them supporting it, but I'm sure it would look probably bad to their stockholders. So I think they've gone in this for the long haul. On the other side of this, and I'm not trying to make this an anti-Verizon webinar here, but there's nothing that controls them. This is when I asked the question at IWC going, where's your commitment to public safety? Will you put it in writing? Will you put it out there? The answer to the crowd was, trust us. We've been there a long time. Just got to trust us. You know what? I don't trust anybody unless there's a contract there, because it is corporate America. I've worked with enough corporations over the years that they've got to have a way to make money. I appreciate that. This can be a symbiotic relationship like we found with AT&T and Sonim, but there's nothing to keep another carrier supporting public safety. It's only if they have enough users. So there's nothing for that commitment. AT&T, there's a contract, there's a whole business unit built in there that they made commitments to their stockholders, public commitments. So I think there's enough checks and balances that were good for 20, 25 years. And at that point, if I'm still alive, ask me how it went.
Let's knock on wood for both of us. So, I think you're right. I think the other thing people don't realize is that AT&T is going to spend tens of billions of dollars to build out band class 14 antennas on all of their tower infrastructure across the country. To in effect spend that money and then lose the license would be incalculable in terms of brand damage, and incalculable in terms of you're losing a lot of money. So I do think I think economically as a CEO of an economic entity, I think there's huge checks and balances in that context. We're starting to run out of time, which is a shame. I could do this with you all day long.
And of course, I never have an opinion on anything, so hard to get me to talk about stuff.
I just posted this morning, there was an article that came out in the New York Times over the weekend that said the DOJ is looking at how to create backdoors or create the way for technology companies like ourselves who make smartphones to provide the encryption keys or keys so that agencies can get that information in a time of need. Apple came out and said that it's a slippery slope. It's kind of I wouldn't compare it to the NRA, but it has the moment that you provide the first backdoor, it's a slippery slope, and you basically provide the ability for anyone to kind of it reduces the security of the phones. My reaction is, I think the agencies that are in charge of our nation's safety and in charge of our kind of critical infrastructure, those agencies are tasked with providing a safe and secure network, and they should be given access to the data that their employees use on those phones. That they need that to do their jobs. They can't be kind of cut out of it simply because that person chose a phone that doesn't give them a backdoor. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you can either agree or disagree with my post.
Yeah, I get both sides of it. I understand what they talk about with the slippery slope, but the fact is, when we use stuff within FirstNet and government, there's everything from criminal justice rules that require security to open records laws state by state to have access. And the reality is, there has to be access by FirstNet, by public safety, by the user agency at certain levels to ensure the security of the network. Having a device locked and nobody get into it really is kind of anti-security. This idea that, they're not going to create a backdoor. Yeah, okay, I get the press, I get the public statements, but for many of you know me, one of my very first careers a long time ago was National Security Agency. I don't believe anything is absolutely secure. There's nothing that's locked. It's just, it's a lot of dialogue. It's just the people who don't admit they can get in or haven't admitted that they know there's a way in. So it sounds good to the consumer community about keeping the device locked, but as a business or governmental entity, we need access devices to ensure we're compliant with laws, to ensure the device is secure, to ensure interoperability. So there's a lot of reasons why we would need access that's a little bit different than what Apple's talking about to the consumers. I hope that makes sense.
It does to me. I mean, one of the things you told me before the show started was that it's one of the huge benefits of having the way that the FirstNet created the bid, the RFP, is that there's a separate and distinct network and a separate and distinct core that's completely dedicated. So in effect, it's structurally more secure.
Yeah, when it comes to us on FirstNet, for the FirstNet users, FirstNet as a network, it's not out in the public domain on the commercial side. You're in a protected network with full security, which meets the latest security requirements. Whether it's 256 today, 512 tomorrow, your VPN tunneled, you're routed through a particular core. So we're not going to be faced with those threats that the average day consumer is. And we'll have people watching other traffic that connects to that core. So entirely different environment for us.
So last question before I wrap up. Tell the audience what you're doing with this All Things FirstNet. It's a great name, by the way, because I kind of just say it. I say, oh, All Things FirstNet, and I realize it's your site, it's your website.
Yeah, so this was one of those, as I watched the FirstNet world, for lack of a better term, develop and change, there are certain things that I expected to happen that I didn't see happening. And so I kind of took it upon myself. And one of those was, we've got bits of information about FirstNet in different places. Donnie Jackson does a great job at Urgent. Mission Critical does a very good job. But there was no single place to go for information, whether that information was, whether that information was news articles, blogs, white papers. So I have built this community called All Things FirstNet blog, where we try and bring in that type of information. We do have some sponsors that pay for advertising, but when it goes to posting information about products, we will do that free for companies. If Sierra Wireless has a new brochure for FirstNet type router, we'll put it on there at no cost. We're just trying to help the community. We're trying to find a place where if you're wondering about who do I get this service from or this product, you can go and we can help you connect with that person. So it's intended as a landing place, single point landing place for people to get information. We are not trying to compete with Urgent or anybody else out there. We're just trying to bring value to the community to give them one stop to further the cause of FirstNet. We want people to adopt FirstNet, be users of FirstNet. It needs to succeed, and it's there simply to help as another mechanism for that success of the FirstNet community.
And this is allthingsfirstnet.com.
Correct.
Okay. Folks, thanks for spending time with us. Dick, thank you. It's such a pleasure to chat, as it always is. And I just, I thank you on behalf of anyone that's listening and anyone that's not, which is more not listening than listening, that we appreciate, I appreciate your service. I appreciate what you did. I appreciate the tenacity and the persistence. And I just can say, as one of the many players in this space, it's just wonderful to see. It's like a seed that you planted a long time ago. It starts to bloom, and you start to see the value of all of the hard work. And I thank you for all of that.
Well, I'm going to sum it up like Jeff Johnson did in one of the hearings. Those of us that come from police, fire, EMS, as he so quaintly told one of the congressmen or senators, I don't recall which, citizens don't pay for us to give up. Fight the fight and get them what they need to protect our communities.
God, amen to that. Amen to that. And if if anyone here listening wants to better understand this, understand what it means about giving up or not giving up, it's, go down to your local police station, go down to your local fire station, stop in, talk to them about the importance of communication, talk to them about the importance of technology and how they use it. And what you'll hear, to your point, Dick, you'll hear the most wonderful, selfless folks talking about serving in a very dutiful way. And they'll talk about, just the more tools they can get to do their jobs better, the more lives are saved.
People who care about their communities, absolutely.
Well, folks, thank you for taking the time. TJ Kennedy's on next Monday. I'm excited to have him. If you want other speakers that you'd like to see on here, other folks, just send me a note. I'd be happy to go track them down. And enjoy the rest of your Monday. Again, this is Bob Plaschke from Sonim Technologies. Thanks so much for taking the time. And again, Dick, thanks. And we will sign off now.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Guys, that was great.
Good.
Dick, thank you, bud.